Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. My older brother Tom was never the same after he came back from the Upper Peninsula. He'd been a different guy before. Funny, wild, the kind of person who'd climb a fire tower just for the view. After that trip though, he changed. Quiet, jumpy. He wouldn't even walk past the woods near our parents' place anymore. I didn't know the whole story until years later, after I'd moved out and started a family of my own. We were sitting on the porch of our childhood home one summer evening, drinking beers. The sun had just dipped below the treetops, casting long shadows over the edge of the property. Out of nowhere, he asked, "You ever hear of the Dogman?" I nodded. "Like the Michigan legend, right? Big, hairy thing, walks on two legs." He looked at me dead, on eyes glassy. "It's not a legend." He told me what happened. And the way he spoke, slow, like every word scraped something raw inside him. I'll never forget it. He and two friends, Mike and Jared, had gone camping near Fayette Historic State Park. They found a remote spot, deep in the woods, far from the trails. The first 2 days were normal, hiking, fishing, drinking. But the third night, everything shifted. They heard howling, not coyotes, not wolves, something deeper, angrier. They joked about it, trying to keep things light, but none of them really laughed. Around 3 a.m., Tom said he woke to footsteps, slow, heavy, bipedal, not crunching through the woods like a deer, but deliberate, calculated. Something was circling the tent. Mike whispered from the other side, "You hear that?" They stayed still, listening. Then Jared screamed. Tom unzipped the tent and bolted, out with a flashlight. But Jared was gone. His sleeping bag was torn open like a wet paper bag, shredded fabric hanging from a tree branch. They searched until sunrise. No blood, no trail, just deep gouges in the bark and a foul stench that made Tom gag. They finally found Jared, or what was left of him, down by the river. Tom wouldn't describe the body, just said he wished he could forget it. They ran, didn't even pack up, drove the dirt road in silence until they hit a gas station with a payphone. Tom said the sheriff who showed up told them it was a bear attack, but the look in the deputy's eyes, he didn't believe it either, and the way the rangers acted, silent, methodical, collecting everything without questions. It was like they'd done this before. Tom never told Jared's family what really happened. Neither did Mike after that. Tom couldn't sleep without the lights on. He started locking every door, every window, even in the middle of the day. And he never went back into the woods. That night, on the porch, he looked at me with something close to fear and said, "It's still out there. Whatever that thing was, it's not done." I believed him, and now, when the wind howls through the trees behind my house, I sometimes think of Jared, and I check my doors, just in case. I used to work the night shift at a relay station near the edge of a wildlife reserve in northern Michigan. Not glamorous, just checking signal strength and monitoring emergency communications. I was a subcontractor, mostly alone, except for an occasional call in from HQ. The facility was small, one desk, one cot, a kitchenette, and the main radio equipment. The tower rose up out of the trees like a steel skeleton. It was early October when it happened, cold enough that the ground was stiff in the mornings, but not yet snow-covered. On that particular night, I was reading a dog-eared novel, sipping instant coffee, when the emergency line crackled, static first, then breathing, long, heavy exhales. Wet. ANIMALISTIC. I sat up. This is Relay Station 4B. Please respond. More breathing. Then a voice, garbled and low. Do not go outside. I froze. Say again. But the line cut. I logged the call, marked it under possible prank, and tried to shake it off. But about 20 minutes later, the motion alarm on the southern perimeter tripped. I pulled up the feed. Nothing. The cameras glitched, grainy and erratic. I threw on my jacket and grabbed the flashlight, thinking maybe a raccoon got too close to the heat sensors. When I stepped outside, the forest was dead quiet. Not the usual chirping or rustle of small creatures. Just stillness. Then, halfway to the fence line, I saw them. Tracks. Not boot prints. Not paws. Something in between. Long toes with claws dug deep into the frozen dirt. The stride was wide. Too wide for a man. They circled the tower, stopping directly under the camera that had glitched. I followed the prints with my light until they vanished. Just ended in the middle of the trail. No backtracking. No other signs. Back inside, I tried to call it in, but the radios were down. Every frequency. Every channel. Dead air. That's when I heard the thud on the roof. Not small, like a sack of meat dropped from a height. Then the scratching started, slow and methodical. I pulled the shotgun from the rack under the desk, aimed it at the ceiling, and waited. I didn't move for hours. Just before dawn, everything stopped. Radio kicked back on. Power stabilized. I climbed to the roof with the rising sun, heart-pounding claw marks. Dozens of them, scored into the metal panels. Hair too, coarse, black, and foul, smelling. I never saw the thing, but I felt it. Later, a DNR officer came to inspect the damage. When I showed him the hair, he took it without a word. Said he'd file it with the wildlife lab. He never followed up. A week later, I was reassigned to a station closer to town, but I still keep the prints I photographed. Because sometimes, at night, I think I hear that same breathing over the static, and I wonder, did it follow me? It was supposed to be just a weekend away. That's how my brother sold it to me. Come up to the cabin, he said. No cell service, no traffic, just the woods and peace and quiet. I needed it. I'd just been through a rough breakup and work was bleeding into every hour of my life. So I packed a bag, left my phone in the glove box, and headed north. His cabin sat near the Wisconsin-Minnesota border, tucked back on a dead-end dirt road near Chequamegon Forest. He'd renovated the place himself. Solar panels, a well, propane for heat. Nothing fancy, just isolation. The first night was perfect. We grilled burgers, drank beers, and caught up. The second night was different. Right after dinner, he grew quiet. He kept glancing toward the tree line like he was listening for something. When I asked, he just shook his head and said, "You'll hear it if it comes." I thought he was messing with me, but later, after we both turned in, I couldn't sleep. There was this pressure in the air, like the kind before a thunderstorm, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Then, sometime past 1 a.m., I heard something move outside, not a branch snapping, not a squirrel or raccoon. Footsteps. Heavy, padded, then a low, rumbling sound, somewhere between a growl and a breath, deep enough that I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window. Something was standing at the edge of the woods, maybe 30 feet away. Its eyes glinted in the moonlight, reflective, animalistic, but wrong. They were too high off the ground. Then it moved fast, It sprinted out of the trees in 2 strides, dropping to all 4s, before rising again, tall and lean, with long reverse, bent legs, and a narrow snout full of teeth. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The thing circled the cabin once, sniffing, scratching, tapping its claws against the siding like it was checking the walls for weak spots. Then it was gone. I backed away from the window and turned to wake my brother, but he was already standing there, shotgun in hand. "You saw it," he said quietly. He wasn't surprised, not even shaken. "How long?" I asked. "First time I saw it was last year. It only shows up when someone new's here. Follows them for days. Then it just waits." "For what?" He didn't answer. The next day we packed up, left early. He didn't ask me to stay longer. A week later, I got a text from his wife. He never made it back. His truck was still at the trailhead. No tracks, no blood, nothing but an empty cabin and a trail of claw marks scratched deep into the front door. I never saw it again, but I still wonder, was I the bait? I wasn't the kind of person who believed in monsters. I'd done over 40 long-distance solo hikes across the US, and I'd always said, if anything was out there, I would have seen it by now. I trusted tracks, weather, maps, and instinct. Never stories. Never the internet rumors that changed on my 42nd hike. It was northern Michigan, just below the Upper Peninsula, about 6 miles from the Manistee National Forest. A friend of mine, Caleb, had disappeared in those woods 2 years earlier. Vanished without a trace on a day hike. His GPS tracker turned off mid-trail, and nothing was ever found. No gear, no prints, nothing. That bugged me for a long time, so when I had a week off, I decided to hike the same area. Not to find him or prove anything, just to retrace his steps and maybe feel like I was closing some invisible door. I had no idea what I was walking into. Day 1 was normal. Thick trees, early autumn breeze, a little fog hugging the earth. I followed the same trail Caleb had taken, marked by his old AllTrails upload. His final coordinates ended near a clearing surrounded by birch and cedar. I camped a half-mile from that spot. At 3:17 a.m., something walked through my camp. I didn't hear it approach, just the sudden sound of twigs breaking, slow, deliberate, like something pacing. Not a deer, not a bear. I stayed silent in my tent, didn't unzip it. My breath hitched when I saw the shadow. It wasn't four-legged, it walked upright, and it was. Huge broad shoulders, long arms, pointed ears, like a Doberman's silhouette on steroids. It sniffed the air loudly, moving toward my tent with this low, guttural growl that vibrated through my chest. I didn't move. I didn't even blink then. Just as suddenly, it was gone. No sound of retreat. Just nothing. In the morning I found massive prints circling my tent, 5-toed, but wrong, like a cross between a canine pad and a man's foot. Deep claws. The prints were over 14 inches long. I packed up and left, fast. But the forest didn't let me go. By midday, I was completely off course. The trail markers vanished. My GPS froze. I hiked for 6 hours and found myself in the same clearing, 3 separate times. It was like something wanted me to stay. At dusk, I heard it again. This time it didn't pace. It charged. I barely had time to climb a boulder before it burst into view. 9 feet tall, black fur matted with mud, long jaws with yellowed teeth, and intelligent, furious eyes. It stood at the base of the rock, clawing at the stone, huffing and snarling, pacing in frustration. I swear, it looked me dead in the eye and smiled. Then it turned and left, like it was bored, or saving me for later. I stayed on that rock until dawn. When I climbed down, my backpack was gone, but there, in its place, was Caleb's knife, the same blade he always carried on hikes, with his initials scratched into the handle. It hadn't been found in 2 years, not by search teams, not by his family, but there it was, clean, sharp, sitting neatly on a smooth stone, like a gift. I hiked out without water, without gear, without a map. I walked for 30 miles, barefoot, hallucinating. By the end, when I made it back to town, people thought I was just another cracked hiker. But the park ranger looked pale when I mentioned the prints. He didn't laugh. He just said, "Some places, people go missing for a reason. You were lucky. It doesn't usually let folks walk out." I never went back. But sometimes I hear growling in my sleep. And sometimes, just for a moment, I swear I can smell pine and wet fur in the middle of my apartment, like something found me and decided to wait. I didn't want to go on that hunting trip. I told my cousin Dylan I had a weird feeling about it. Couldn't explain it, just something gnawing at my gut. But Dylan's not the type to take no for an answer. He rented a cabin out in the remote stretches of Kentucky, said it was a once-in-a-lifetime spot. Deep woods, private land, no cell reception. We were 5 in total. Dylan, me, his buddy Chris, a quiet guy named Reese, and an older man named Roy, who was kind of a family friend, and one of those been hunting, since I could, walk types. He was grizzled and gray, but still sharp-eyed and lean, the kind of man you trust, with a loaded weapon and not much else. The first couple of days were normal enough. Early mornings, long treks, sitting in tree stands for hours. We didn't see much, but we drank enough beer at night to laugh it off. On the 3rd evening, Roy didn't come back from his watch. Dylan figured he'd just stayed out too late. He sometimes did that, but something felt off. The sun dipped, the forest started whispering in that unsettling way it does when everything's watching you. And I swear I saw something tall move between the trees. Just a flash of it, a silhouette. I tried to brush it off. It's easy to see things when your nerves are wound up, but Chris saw it too. His eyes were big and wet like a scared dog's. He didn't say anything, just picked up his rifle and started checking the chamber again and again. At around 1 a.m., we heard a scream. Not human, not quite animal either. It echoed across the hills like something being torn apart. Then came the silence. That kind of silence that seems to crush your lungs. You hold your breath without realizing it. Jace grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the tree line. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. But there was nothing to hear. Just the darkness and a faint scraping sound. Something dragging through the dirt and pine needles. Then we saw it. It stepped into the firelight like it didn't care we were there. 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Long limbs, covered in dark, coarse hair. But it wasn't a bear. And it wasn't a man. Its head was wrong, elongated, like a wolf's, but exaggerated. Its eyes glowed amber, and it had teeth too large to be anything natural. Its arms hung low and ended in claws that shimmered with something wet. We all froze, except for Dylan. He raised his rifle and fired. The creature flinched, staggered back, but it didn't fall. It roared, a low, growling sound that seemed to shake the trees themselves, and charged. I don't remember running. I don't remember grabbing anything. The next thing I knew, we were sprinting through pitch black forest, branches clawing at our faces, breath ragged. Chris tripped. I heard him scream once, then nothing. Jace grabbed my arm and yanked me behind a rock outcropping. We stayed there all night, rifles drawn, listening to footsteps circle us, over and over. It never left. By morning, it was gone. We made it back to the cabin. Dylan was already there, covered in blood, half in shock. He wouldn't say a word, just rocked back and forth on the floor with the rifle clutched to his chest. They found Roy's body 3 days later, stripped of all skin from the chest down. Chris was never found. We never told the full story. The police said animal attack. We didn't argue. But I know what I saw, and I will never go into the woods again without feeling watched. We weren't supposed to be out there that night. It was me, my younger brother Tyler, and his best friend Nate. We'd taken the Jeep into the back trails behind our neighborhood in northern Michigan, an old logging road that cut through state forest land. It was late October, the kind of night when the cold sets deep into your joints and everything sounds louder in the dark. Tyler had just gotten back from his first year of college, and we hadn't hung out in months. The plan was simple. Drive out, park, light a small fire, talk, and maybe scare ourselves with some ghost stories. You know, nostalgia. It didn't go that way. The first weird thing was the silence. I don't mean the usual forest quiet. I mean complete and utter stillness. No wind, no rustling, no distant sounds of deer stepping over deadfall, no bugs. We didn't really notice it at first. We were too busy laughing, sipping from the flask Tyler had brought, tossing sticks into the fire. But about 40 minutes in, Nate stood up, turned in a slow circle, and said, "Is it just me, or is it way too quiet?" That's when I noticed it. Tyler shrugged it off. It's late fall. Everything's either asleep or dead. But his voice didn't sound confident. Not really. Then the smell hit us. It came in fast, like someone had opened a sealed bag of rotting meat just inches from your face. Tyler doubled over gagging, and Nate stepped away from the fire, shining his flashlight toward the trees. "Don't," I said. I didn't know why I said it, but something in my gut told me we were better off not knowing. We saw it anyway. The light caught something low to the ground at first. Too low. Then it rose, slowly. It wasn't crawling, it was crouching. And then it stood, eyeshine. That's what I remember most. Pale yellow, not reflective like a deer's self. Lit, like two sickly flashlights burning from inside its skull. Its face was wrong, elongated but flattened, like a dog's muzzle smashed against a windshield. And its mouth, it hung open just enough to reveal long, uneven fangs that didn't belong in anything on this planet. We froze, all of us. The creature just stared, head slightly cocked, breathing slow but audible even from that distance. Then it took one step forward. I grabbed Tyler and ran. Nate didn't move at first. He was frozen, I think. But as soon as I reached the Jeep, he was right behind me, screaming. We drove. God, we drove like hell. Hit every pothole and ditch on that old road, praying the suspension wouldn't snap. None of us spoke the whole way home, but we all knew what we saw, and we all thought it was over. But it followed us that night. I woke up at 3:22 a.m. sharp. No reason. Just snapped awake. My window was open, just a crack, but I swear I could hear breathing from the trees behind my house. Tyler called me the next day, voice shaking. He'd heard claws on his roof. Nate said someone, or something, scratched up his back door and left muddy prints on his kitchen floor. We tried to laugh it off, act tough, play it cool, but none of us ever went back out to those woods. Nate moved to towns over. Tyler started sleeping with a shotgun under his bed, and me. Some nights, I wake up at 3:22 a.m. on the dot every time. I check the tree line and every time, I swear, I see those same yellow eyes watching me, waiting. was working nights back then, hauling propane tanks for a small fuel company in West Central Wisconsin. It was quiet work, deliveries out to rural cabins, mostly retirees or hunters prepping for winter. I didn't mind the hours, less traffic, fewer people. That particular evening, the dispatcher sent me to Ward Blanchard Road, a backwoods stretch I'd only been on twice before. It snaked through dense forest with barely any houses nearby, and by the time I got close, the sun had dipped below the treetops. The GPS lost signal halfway down the road, but I had physical paperwork with the coordinates, so I kept going. The forest felt closer than usual, like it had grown in, hungry to reclaim the road. No birds, no squirrels, just a gray hush pressing in from every direction. It started with the smell. I thought I'd blown a brake line, or maybe hit a skunk. But the stench was sharper, like copper and mildew and roadkill mashed together. I rolled the window up halfway, but that only made it worse. Thick and cloying inside the cab. Then I heard the scream. Not human, not even close. It echoed off the trees, too loud to be anything small. Long, drawn out, like metal scraping against metal but organic. I instinctively slammed the brakes, heart pounding. There was movement to the left. Something big, fast. I only saw it in glimpses between trees. Tall, black, upright. At first I thought it was a bear. But bears don't move like that. They don't duck their heads and sprint on two legs like track athletes. And they sure as hell don't circle you without ever breaking branches. I stepped out of the truck against every instinct I had, clipboard in hand, trying to confirm the delivery address. That's when I heard it breathing, deep, heaving, animal lungs. I turned. There it was, no more than 20 feet away, right at the tree line, crouched low but not hiding, watching. Its shoulders were massive, covered in coarse, dark fur. The snout was elongated, the eyes reflecting light that wasn't there. Its teeth were uneven, yellowed, like old bone knives. But the worst part, it smiled, not like a dog panting. This thing pulled its lips back slowly, deliberately. It wanted me to see. It wanted to show it knew I was scared. I stumbled backward and hit the side of the truck. The thing didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared until I fumbled with the door and got inside. As soon as I slammed it shut, it vanished. Not ran, vanished. Like fog pulled backward by wind. I sat there for a long time, hands shaking on the wheel, engine idling. Eventually, I finished the delivery, left the tank by the cabin porch, and peeled off back toward the main road. I didn't see it again that night, but I've never taken a route near Blanchard Road since. Weeks later, a guy from dispatch mentioned something strange in passing. Said another driver saw a wolf on stilts dart across that same road at 3 a.m. He laughed it off, but I didn't. I'd never told him that I still hear that scream in my dreams. And when I wake, my window's always open just a crack, even if I locked it tight the night before. I was never a believer in monsters. Ghosts, maybe, but creatures. Things that walk on two legs and don't belong to any species we know. That was stuff for late night radio and fringe internet forums. But then something happened on my uncle's farm, back in 2014, that I still can't explain. And ever since, I haven't been able to go near a field at night without checking over my shoulder every few minutes. That summer, I'd gone out to help with the harvest. My uncle Stan ran a small soybean operation in northwestern Illinois. Real salt of the earth guy. I'd just finished my first year of college and offered to help with maintenance, field work, whatever he needed. He appreciated the company more than anything. Said the land gets too damn quiet for the mind sometimes. One night, maybe a week into my stay, We were sitting on the back porch after dinner. It was just past 10, and the sky was clear, stars all over. You could smell the soybean plants heavy in the air, but something felt off. I don't know how else to say it. Like the pressure dropped, or the silence became too complete. That's when we heard the dogs start going nuts. My uncle had 3, usually quiet, lazy mutts, but that night, they were at the edge of the fence barking like they were seeing a home intruder. Hackles raised, teeth bared, barking at the field. Stan grabbed his old Remington and a flashlight and told me to stay inside. Of course, I didn't listen. I followed a few steps behind him as we moved out past the fence toward the soybean rows. We didn't see anything at first. The beam of the flashlight cut across the field like a knife, and there was nothing but rustling plants and moonlight. Then we found the tracks. They were massive, bigger than any wolf I've ever heard of, at least twice the size of my uncle's boot, and they were spaced like something had been walking upright. I'll never forget what he said. "These ain't coyote prints. Hell, they ain't anything, Prince." Before we could process it, we heard a deep, low growl, but not from ahead. From behind us, we spun around. There it was, maybe 30 feet away, near the tree line. It was tall, at least 7 feet, covered in dark, patchy fur. Its limbs were too long, and its torso looked almost human, but deformed, like its bones were too big for its skin. The face was the worst part. It had a muzzle, yes, but also these sharp, intelligent eyes. And its mouth, it didn't snarl. It grinned. Stan raised the rifle, but before he could shoot, the thing let out a sound that rattled my teeth. A howl, but deeper, closer to a scream. Then it dropped to all fours and bolted into the field, faster than anything I've seen before or since. We ran back to the house, locked the doors, and didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, the soybean rows where it ran were flattened, like a small truck had barreled through them, and scattered all through the field were deer carcasses, ripped apart, partially eaten, and left to rot. The sheriff came by, took photos, nodded a lot, said it was probably a cougar. But my uncle and I knew better. A week later, I went back to school. Stan called me that fall and said he was selling the place. Said he couldn't stand the nights anymore. He died 3 years ago. Never talked about what we saw again. But sometimes, when I'm alone, driving past empty fields, I swear I see something out in the rows, standing just tall enough above the crops to know it's watching and waiting. It was supposed to be a simple overnight shift. I was 23, working part-time as a technician at a small-town radio station tucked deep in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. KQRT 92.5. Barely anyone listened unless they were on a logging road with nothing else to do. But someone had to keep the generator humming and the signal clean. And on weekends, that someone was me. The building itself was lonely. 1 floor, concrete, surrounded by a sea of pines. The radio tower rose behind it like a skeleton finger, poking into the sky. It buzzed with faint static, like it was breathing, around 1 a.m. After doing a quick equipment check, I grabbed a cup of instant coffee and went out for a smoke. The moon was huge, so bright it looked fake. Everything had a silver sheen. The woods, the grass, even the tower glinted. And then, the forest went quiet. I mean, completely silent. No wind, no crickets, not even the hum of power lines. Just dead air. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the pressure, like something huge was watching me from the tree line. Then I heard the first snap of a branch, heavy, deliberate, out of instinct. I turned my flashlight on and aimed it toward the sound. 2 eyes reflected back at me, far too high off the ground. I froze. It stepped forward, just slightly, into view. It looked like a wolf, at least, the head did, but its shoulders were impossibly broad, and it stood upright, the way a man does. The fur on its chest was matted and patchy. Its legs bent the wrong way, like they'd broken and healed wrong. It sniffed the air and let out a breath I could hear from 40 feet away. I backed toward the door slowly. I didn't run. I couldn't have, even if I tried. Then something happened that froze my blood. The creature took another step and tilted its head at me, like it was curious. Then it raised a long, clawed hand and tapped the metal tower behind. It pinged just once, like it knew I was there to keep that thing running, like it knew what the tower did. I turned and bolted back inside, locking the door behind me. My hands shook so badly I could barely type the emergency report. I didn't see it again that night, but around 3:40 a.m., just before my shift was over, the entire station went dead. No power, no signal, no backup. I had to sit there in the pitch dark, the only sound being the ticking of the wall clock and my own shallow breathing. When the morning tech arrived, we checked the tower. Nothing wrong. Power, fine. No footprints, no signs of damage. It was like it never happened. I quit a week later. Never gave a reason. Just walked out one night and never went back. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I listen to that old station. Online, KQRT still plays static at the top of every hour. The engineers claim it's a glitch they can't fix, but I know better. That's not static, it's breathing. I didn't believe in anything I couldn't shoot. That's what I used to say, anyway. I was raised in rural Indiana, where the only monsters we worried about were meth heads, coyotes, and maybe a wandering bear if you got unlucky in the southern hills. My name's Travis, and back in 2017, I inherited my grandfather's farmhouse after he passed. Just a modest place, fields out front, a tree line in the back, and beyond that, a hollow we were always told to stay away from. Granddad never gave a clear reason. The land back there don't belong to us, he'd say. I thought he meant it legally, but I learned later he meant something else entirely. It started with the dogs. I had 2 coonhounds, Daisy and Buck. Smart, loyal, trained. 4 years. One night in late October, around 2:30 a.m., both started whining in the laundry room where they slept. I figured maybe a raccoon was near the garbage bins, so I grabbed my .22 and stepped outside with a flashlight. The moment the door creaked open, Daisy bolted out like she'd lost her damn mind, snarling, barking, crashing into the corn stalks at the edge of the field. Buck hesitated at the door, growling low with his hackles raised. That dog had never shown fear before. I called Daisy over and over, but all I heard was rustling, then silence, then a sound I've never forgotten, a yelp, high and strangled, then nothing. I found Daisy's collar the next morning, just the collar, no blood, no fur. It was almost placed there, like a message, on top of a perfectly smooth stump, just 10 feet from the hollow's edge. That night, I heard something pacing outside the house. Not the quick scamper of a fox or the loping gait of a deer, no. These were heavy, 2-legged steps. Slow, deliberate. I shut off every light and crouched by the window with my shotgun. It passed under the yard light, and I saw it clear as day. This thing, whatever it was, had the body of a bear, the legs of a man, and the head of a twisted canine. The eyes, they glowed, but not like reflection. They burned, like coals. It stopped and sniffed the air. Then it looked right at me. No sound, just knowing. It walked back into the corn and disappeared. The next week was hell. I heard howls every night. Low, guttural. Not wolf, not coyote. Wrong. The air would turn cold. Radios would pop and hiss with static. Buck wouldn't leave the basement. I finally talked to old Mr. Riker down the road. He was in his 80s and didn't say much, but when I told him about what I'd seen, his eyes darkened. "They come from the hollow," he said. "Ain't no animal, not by God's hand. You don't go back there. Not alone, not armed, not ever." He told me they used to call it the Dogman, some old story from before settlers even came here. Native tribes left that land untouched. Claimed it was where the skin between worlds was too thin. I started sleeping with every door bolted, every curtain drawn, every weapon loaded. Then, one night, I heard scratching at the back door. Not claws, fingernails, long, slow, deliberate. I didn't open it. I just stood there, heart pounding. As that thing scraped a single word into the wood colon mind, I moved a month later, left everything behind. Farm, tools, truck, even Buck. I buried him the morning after I found him torn apart on the porch, like someone had unmade him. I don't sleep well. I don't walk near woods. And when I hear a howl on the wind, I know it's not far. It never is. Back when I was 22, I worked as a security guard for a logging operation in northern Michigan. The site was called Crooked Pine Camp, middle of nowhere, 20 miles from the nearest paved road, surrounded by endless forest. The job paid well because nobody else wanted it. Long shifts, isolation, wild animals, you name it. They had me posted from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in a prefab cabin with a radio and a floodlight generator. My job was simple: watch the equipment, call in anything weird, and try not to die of boredom. The first couple nights were uneventful. Cold wind, distant owls, maybe a raccoon or two sniffing around. But on the 5th night, something changed. It started with the trees going silent. You don't realize how loud the woods are until they stop. No crickets, no birds, not even the wind rustling. Just an unnatural stillness that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Then the smell hit me. Wet fur and copper. Blood. I stepped outside with my flashlight and swept the beam across the clearing. That's when I saw them. Not eyes, shadows moving where there shouldn't have been any. Just beyond the tree line. Tall figures, shifting just out of the light's reach. One of them stepped forward. It was massive, 7 feet, easy, hunched, long arms ending in clawed hands. A canine head, but distorted, too wide at the jaw, too many teeth. Its legs were jointed wrong, like a digitigrade animal, but it walked upright like a man. I froze, couldn't even breathe. It stared at me for a long minute. Then it let out a low, vibrating growl that I felt in my chest. I ran back into the cabin, locked the door, and radioed the base. Static. No response. Then, the scratching began. Not a frantic attack. Just slow, dragging claws across the wall panels. Around the cabin, one side to the other. They were circling, playing with me. I kept the shotgun in my lap, and the floodlights on. Hours passed. I couldn't see them anymore, but I knew they were out there. I could feel them, watching. When dawn finally broke, the noises stopped. The sun peeked over the tree line and everything went back to normal. Birds chirping, wind blowing. Just like that. The relief crew arrived 2 hours late. When I told them what happened, they exchanged looks, and one of them muttered he saw. It turns out, this wasn't the first time. Every few years, someone would report something big in the woods. Trees torn out of the ground, howling like no wolf could make. One guy even quit on the spot after finding deep claw marks etched into the metal bulldozer cab. I quit 2 days later. I packed up and left. I still hear that growl sometimes when I'm half asleep, and every now and then, I wake up to find claw marks in the frost on my windows. Far from Michigan, but but not far enough. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a weekend getaway. My cousin Derek had just bought some land out near the western edge of Wisconsin. Deep woods, a private lake, total off-grid living. He invited me, and a couple of our buddies too, come out for beer, fishing, and a break from the chaos of our everyday lives. I work in IT. I spend more time with servers than people. I needed it. We got there late on a Friday. Derek's cabin was rough. 2 rooms, no insulation, barely any signal, just a propane stove, lanterns, and a rusted wood stove that smoked if you didn't stoke it right. We laughed, cracked a few beers, and roasted hot dogs over the fire pit out back. The first night passed quietly, if cold, but the second night, something was wrong. It started with the sound of the woods shifting. I've camped enough to know what a deer sounds like, even a bear. But this was something else. Something heavier, but moving too fast for its size. I was out behind the cabin, taking a leak, when I heard it, snapping twigs, a quick rustle. Not like a squirrel, not even like a deer bolting. It was more like a large dog running, but on 2 legs. When I turned to look, I caught just a flicker of motion between the trees. Something tall, black, hunched forward. It disappeared in a blink. I backed into the cabin and didn't say anything. I didn't want to be that guy. Maybe it was just nerves. But later that night, Derek's dog, Tucker, a big old lab mix, started growling. Not barking, just growling low in his throat, his hackles raised, eyes glued to the window. Then the scratching started, not loud, subtle, like claws tracing slow circles along the siding, like something trying to tease us. Derek grabbed the shotgun. I held a flashlight. The others thought we were overreacting, until the howling started. This wasn't a wolf's howl. It was too close. And it went on for almost a full minute, rising in pitch like it was calling something. Then we heard the reply dot from across the lake. That was when we saw it. It stepped into the clearing just at the edge of the tree line, 7 or 8 feet tall, matted fur, a hunched posture, with arms too long for its frame. Its legs bent backwards like a dog's, but it stood there, upright, watching us. Its eyes reflected the light, not just like an animal, but like they knew what they were seeing. It didn't flinch when Derek raised the shotgun, didn't move when I turned the flashlight directly at it, and then, in a flash, it was gone. We stayed up the rest of the night, weapons in hand. Come dawn, we packed up and left. None of us said much on the way back, not even Derek. But here's the thing, when I got home, hundreds of miles away, I noticed something strange. My backyard motion light kept going off, every night. Always between 2 and 3. A M. At first, I thought it was raccoons. Then, one morning, I found long scratches on the side of my garage. Deep ones, like claws had dug in. 3 vertical gouges, each one nearly a foot long. I set up a trail cam. It didn't record anything. But the next morning, the camera was gone. Just gone, no sign of it. Just more scratch marks on the tree it had been strapped to. And prints, too big for any dog, too defined to be human. Something followed me home, and I think it's still watching. I never thought I'd say this, but the night my truck broke down in rural Iowa might have saved my life, and ruined it all at once. It was August, and I was hauling equipment back from a demolition job near Cedar Rapids. I took a back route to shave off time, a lonely county road, flanked by endless fields of corn that stood well over 7 feet high. My GPS glitched out about 20 miles in, and that's when the truck just gave out. Dead as a doornail. I cursed, kicked the tire, popped the hood. Nothing looked obviously wrong. The sun was already dipping, casting everything in that orange glow that makes familiar things feel off. I called roadside assistance. "We'll be there in an hour and a half," they said. Great, so I sat in the cab, windows rolled down, the sound of insects buzzing louder than usual. Then I noticed something strange. The bugs stopped. Not a cricket, not a mosquito, not even the wind rustling the stalks. Just dead silence. That's when I heard it. A crunch. Something was moving in the corn. Not an animal scurrying. This was heavier, rhythmic, almost deliberate. Something bipedal. I leaned out of the window and stared toward the field. At first I thought I saw a deer, but no, it was upright. Maybe a man. But there was no farm nearby. Nobody should have been out there then. It stepped closer to the edge of the field, and I saw it in full. It stood at least 7 feet tall, built like a linebacker, covered in short, bristled fur, the shape of a wolf, but on 2 legs, arms hanging, low and muscular, claws that seemed to twitch with each step. The head, God, the head looked like something out of a nightmare. Long muzzle, ears cocked forward, and yellow eyes glowing faintly even in the fading light. It saw me. I could feel it. There was an intensity in its stare, like it was deciding whether to attack or just watch. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then it opened its mouth. A low, guttural growl rolled out, vibrating through my chest like a bass drum. It took a step toward the ditch between the field and the road. Another step. My body finally reacted. I slammed the lock button, rolled the window up, and ducked under the dashboard like a terrified kid. I stayed there, eyes shut, waiting to hear claws on metal or glass breaking. But it never came. After what felt like hours, I peeked over the edge of the dashboard. It was gone. When the tow truck finally arrived, I didn't tell the guy what I saw, just muttered something about coyotes. But I know what I saw. I went back to the spot the next day in daylight. There were tracks, huge, deep impressions in the dirt, shaped like elongated paws. I never used that road again. And sometimes, when I'm outside my house at night, I swear I see cornstalks moving in the dark, even though there's no field nearby. I was fresh out of college when it happened. My best friend Jesse and I decided to spend a weekend camping in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Not the touristy parts, somewhere remote, off the grid, where we could fish, drink beer, and pretend we weren't heading back to jobs we already hated. We ended up near the Antonagon River. There was this primitive campsite only accessible by a narrow dirt trail that barely qualified as a road. No cell signal. No rangers, just trees and silence. It was perfect, until it wasn't. The first day was great. We fished, built a fire, grilled some trout, shared a bottle of bourbon, and crashed in our tent just after midnight. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. The fire was mostly out, just embers, and everything was quiet except for the river murmuring nearby. I walked about 10 yards from the tent with my flashlight, did my business, and was just sipping up when I heard something splash upriver. At first, I thought it was a deer, but the splashing was too heavy, too steady. It was waiting, not running. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound and froze. There was something standing in the river, at least 8 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with a head like a German shepherd. Its eyes reflected the beam, glowing gold. It wasn't fur exactly, more like something rough and matted, wet from the water. Its legs were bent like a dog's, but it was standing upright. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. My brain just refused to process what I was seeing. Then it took a step toward the bank. The moment it did, I stumbled backward and ran full sprint back to the tent. Jesse sat up instantly when I crashed through the flap. "Dude, what the hell? There's something in the river," I gasped. "Something wrong." He thought I was drunk or joking until we heard it. A deep, raspy breath, like something with a massive chest was sniffing the air just outside our tent. Then a slow drag of claws over the nylon wall, soft at first. Testing, Jesse's face went pale. He whispered, "We need to run." "No," I mouthed back. "It's hunting." We sat there in silence for what felt like hours, too afraid to even breathe. The creature circled us once, then we heard it move back toward the river. At dawn, we packed up and hiked out without speaking a word. I've never been camping since. A few months later, Jesse sent me an article. It was about Dogman sightings. I had never heard of that name before, but when I saw one of the sketches in the article, I dropped my phone. It was exactly what I saw. Sometimes I still dream about it. I hear the river, the breathing, the slow scrape of claws, and always, I wake up feeling like it's still watching me. I was a trucker for almost 12 years, and I've driven through every kind of weather, road, and empty stretch of America you can imagine. You learn to love the solitude after a while, or at least you convince yourself it's better than sitting behind a desk. But there's one night out on a back road in Kentucky that still makes me question if I was ever alone on the road at all. It was early October, just after dusk, and I was running behind schedule because of an earlier breakdown. My route was supposed to stay on the main highway, but I made a last-minute decision to cut through an old service road near Daniel Boone National Forest. My GPS didn't even register it properly, but I'd taken it once years ago, and I remembered it shaved at least 45 minutes off the trip. The pavement turned to gravel quickly, and then just dirt. I slowed down to maybe 25 miles per hour, trying not to bounce too hard over potholes and tree roots. The forest pressed in on both sides, and I had to keep my high beams on just to see more than 20 feet ahead. It was dead quiet, no other cars, no houses, just wilderness. Then I saw something standing on the road. It was right in the middle, tall and thin, facing away from me. At first I thought it was a deer standing on two legs. I know how that sounds, but it wasn't a bear. I've seen plenty of bears in my life, and this thing had a long, narrow snout, like a wolf, but too big. Its arms were oddly long, and its claws reflected in my lights like they were wet. I slowed the truck to a stop. It didn't move. Then, slowly, it turned its head, just its head, and looked right into my windshield. I felt a pressure in my chest, like I was being stared down by something that wasn't just curious. It was aware. It was calculating. I blinked, and it was gone. Just like that. 1 second it was there, and the next, nothing. No sound, no rustling, nothing. But I swear I felt it move, like it was circling. I hit the gas, and got out of there, fast. The trees blurred by, and for a split second, I swear I saw it again, running alongside the truck. Not behind. Beside. It was keeping up with me at nearly 40 miles per hour. I didn't stop until I got to the next major town. I parked in a well-lit truck stop, and just sat there, engine running, hand shaking so bad I couldn't even pour myself coffee. The next day, I told my dispatcher I wouldn't be taking that route again. Didn't give him a reason. I've never seen it since, but every time I drive at night now, especially through thick woods, I find myself watching the tree line, waiting, because I think it remembers me too. It was after my mother passed that I finally came back to the place I swore I'd never return to, my childhood home in western Michigan. The land had been in our family for generations, 100 acres of forest and field bordered by old iron fencing, the kind that was more for show than security. After the funeral, I stayed behind to settle her affairs, clean up the property, and figure out what to do with the place. That's when it happened. I remember it was a Sunday evening, clear. Skies, no wind, not even the usual songbirds. The kind of stillness that makes the back of your neck tighten. I was burning some old wood out by the collapsed barn, thinking about selling the house, when I heard something in the woods. It was a sharp, deliberate crack of a branch, like something heavy had stepped on it. I stood still. It wasn't a deer. Deer are quick and light, and they make that telltale rustle. This was something heavier. I called out, thinking maybe it was a lost hiker or some kids. Nothing, but then I smelled it. A thick, coppery stench, like rotting meat mixed with wet dog. It hit the back of my throat and made my eyes water. I backed away from the fire and grabbed the axe I'd been using to split wood. The woods were dense, but the edge was only about 20 yards from where I stood. That's when I saw it, eyes reflecting orange in the firelight, just between the trees. Low to the ground at first, then they rose. High, way too high for any normal animal. I froze, couldn't breathe. It stepped out, 7 feet tall, maybe more. Lean, but not skinny. Muscles under dark, matted fur, long limbs, claws like curved knives, and a snout, long canine, but twisted in a way that made it seem wrong. It looked at me not like prey, but like competition. I wanted to run. Every cell in my body was screaming to run, but I didn't. I lifted the axe instead and stared it down. It took one step forward, then another. It stopped just shy of the firelight, sniffing the air, eyes locked onto me, and then, without a sound, it turned and disappeared back into the woods. The silence came back just as suddenly. No birds, no bugs, not even the fire crackling. That night, I didn't sleep. Over the next 3 days, I kept seeing signs, claw marks on the shed, piles of bones near the creek bed, that same god-awful smell lingering by the house at dawn. I installed motion cameras. They never caught more than a blur, too fast, too smart to be caught fully. I found a neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, an old widow, living 2 miles down the road. When I finally got the nerve to ask her if she'd seen anything strange around the woods, she just nodded slowly. "You saw it," she said. "Same one that took my husband's dogs. Same one that killed the goats out at the Miller farm last spring. Been here a long time. Why doesn't anyone do anything?" She looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You don't deal with things like that. You respect them. You stay out of their way. That's the only way." I left the next week, didn't sell the house. Didn't burn it down either. It still sits there, boarded up, untouched. Because some places aren't meant to be reclaimed. Some creatures aren't meant to be confronted, and the forest out back, it still watches, still waits. When I was 19, I worked a night shift at a gas station just off Route 39 in Kentucky. It was the kind of job you take when you've got no real plan. Cash under the table, free coffee, and no one asking too many questions. I didn't have a car, so I used to cut through a stretch of woods known as Hollow Pine to get to the station faster. Locals warned against it, saying weird stuff happened there, especially after dark. I figured it was just superstitious talk. I only needed to walk the trail once to realize they weren't joking. It was late September, the air still clinging to the last breath of summer. That night, I was running behind, so I took the shortcut through Hollow Pine. The woods were quiet, too quiet, but I chalked it up to my nerves. About halfway through the trail, I started hearing footsteps, heavy ones, like boots on wet leaves. I turned around, expecting to see some late-night hiker, or maybe another shortcut, taker like me, no one. Then I heard breathing, deep, raspy, and close. The trail narrowed, flanked by trees with bark blackened from old lightning strikes. I kept walking faster now, and the footsteps matched my pace. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I ran, they ran. I glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I saw it. Standing off to the side of the trail was something enormous, half-shadowed in the underbrush. It stood upright, broad shoulders slouched forward, arms long enough to brush the tops of the ferns. Its head was unmistakably canine, long snout, pointed ears, but the eyes, they were human, like, intelligent, angry. It didn't chase me. Not yet. It just watched. I backed away, not taking my eyes off it, then turned and ran harder than I ever have in my life. I don't remember how I made it out of those woods. I don't remember hitting the gravel of the roadside or reaching the gas station. All I remember is slamming the door shut behind me and collapsing behind the counter, sweating, panting, shaking, for a week. I refused to go through those woods. I added an extra 40 minutes to my commute and didn't care. But curiosity gets stupid real fast when you're 19 and bored. One night, I took the trail again, only this time during daylight. I needed to prove to myself I hadn't imagined it. Halfway through, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A series of deep claw marks gouged into a tree, and a pile of small bones stacked neatly beneath it, like some kind of offering. The air smelled metallic and wrong. I turned back. That was the last time I ever used that shortcut. A few months later, a hiker went missing in Hollow Pine. The search party found his backpack, his camera, and nothing else. Locals blamed it on a bear or a meth lab gone bad, but I knew better, because some nights, especially when the wind is right, I swear I can still hear the breathing just beyond the edge of the woods, and it's waiting for someone else to take the shortcut. It's funny how the mind can suppress memories, like it knows there are some things too horrible to remember. But no matter how hard I tried to forget, that night in the cabin always crept back into my thoughts. No matter how much time passed, the howl would always echo in my mind. I was up in the northern woods of Michigan, staying in a cabin owned by my cousin Aaron. He had been going on about how peaceful it was up there, how it was the perfect escape from city life, and he was right. It was beautiful, a retreat from the noise and chaos, with the nearest neighbor miles away. It was quiet, a little eerie, but serene in its own way. I never planned on going back after that night. Aaron and I had spent the first couple of days hiking through the woods, fishing in a nearby lake, and just enjoying the solitude. It was the kind of peace I had never really known. We sat by the fire, laughed, drank beer, and traded stories late into the night. The air was crisp, and the wind would rustle the leaves, but nothing unusual happened. That was until the fourth night. It was getting close to midnight when I heard it. I'd gone out to the porch to get a breath of fresh air, away from the buzz of our conversation. The woods were always thick with sounds, the chirps of crickets, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. But then I heard something different, something that chilled me to the bone. It was a low growl, deeper than anything I had heard before. I figured it was some sort of animal, a coyote or something. But then the growl turned into a distinct howl, long, eerie, and filled with something primal. I froze, trying to place it. The sound didn't belong to any animal I knew. It was too loud, too deep, and it seemed to come from all around us. The air felt thick, as if the forest itself had gone still, waiting for something. I stepped back into the cabin. Aaron was still inside, sipping his drink. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You hear that?" I asked. He nodded, face pale. "Yeah, Sounds like a wolf, but not right. I didn't say anything more. We both knew that wolves weren't in this part of the woods. I could see the unease growing in his eyes. I wasn't the only one who was unsettled. For a few minutes, we both sat in silence, trying to brush off the feeling of dread that was slowly creeping up on us. But then came another howl. This time, it was closer. I could feel the ground vibrate beneath me, as if the thing was right outside. Aaron stood abruptly, setting his drink down with a clang. "We need to check this out," he said, but I could see it in his eyes. He was terrified. We grabbed flashlights, checked the rifle we'd brought for the trip, and cautiously stepped outside. The wind was biting, the air colder than it should have been for that time of year. We moved quietly, trying to keep our presence undetected, but the further we went into the woods, the worse the feeling got. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my breath came out in sharp, visible bursts. The howl came again, louder this time, cutting through the trees like a knife. And then, in the distance, I saw something, movement. The trees were too dense, and it was hard to make out exactly what I was seeing, but it was massive. Not a bear, not a deer, but something taller, broader, and off. Aaron grabbed my arm, his hand ice cold. "We need to go back," he whispered, barely able to breathe. I tried to protest, but then I heard the unmistakable crunch of twigs. Something heavy was moving toward us, and then I saw it, standing at the edge of the trees, watching us with glowing, yellow eyes. The creature was massive, hunched like a wolf, but its arms were long and its legs bent in unnatural ways. It was covered in matted fur, its chest heaving, saliva dripping from its snout. Its face was a grotesque mix of canine and human features, and its teeth were far too large. It wasn't just an animal, it was something else entirely. I don't remember how we got back to the cabin. One second we were frozen in fear, and the next, we were running, stumbling over the thick underbrush. I could hear it behind us, its claws scraping against bark, its breath coming in quick, jagged bursts. We made it back to the cabin, slamming the door behind us, hearts pounding in our chests. The howl came again, this time directly outside the cabin, so close I could feel it in my bones. We locked every door and window, grabbing anything we could as makeshift weapons. The rest of the night was a blur. We stayed awake, listening to the thing circling the cabin, its growls and howls growing, louder, angrier. At some point, it stopped. We didn't know if it was still out there, waiting, or if it had left. By the time morning came, there was no sign of it. No prints in the snow, no hair caught on the trees, no blood. It was as if it had never been there at all. But Aaron and I both knew better. We never spoke of that night again, but we never went back to the cabin either. It's been 5 years since that night. I've moved far away now, settled in the city, trying to forget the things I saw. But sometimes, when I'm alone in bed, I hear a howl in the distance, and I can't help but wonder if it's waiting for me to come back. I had always been an outdoors person. Ever since I was a kid, I'd found solace in the woods, the quiet serenity, the feeling of being miles away from the world's troubles. The deep woods of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan were my favorite. My friends and I had made a tradition out of camping there every summer for the past 5 years. But nothing could prepare me for what happened that night. It was late June, and the days were growing longer. The sun barely set, and the warmth of summer filled the air. We had set up camp by the creek, a place we'd been to countless times. The campfire crackled and popped as we roasted marshmallows and told stories. Everything was normal. Until at WASN single quotes, it was just me and my buddy Jason that night. Our other friends had already turned in for the night, retreating to their tents. As the sky darkened, But Jason and we were still sitting around the fire, talking about life and cracking jokes. We weren't ready to sleep. The firelight flickered, and we could hear the usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of small animals in the underbrush, the occasional hoot of an owl. Then, something changed. The forest grew unnervingly quiet, as though the very woods were holding their breath. I looked over at Jason, who had stopped talking. His face was pale, his eyes wide, staring at something just beyond the tree line. I followed his gaze, but at first, I didn't see anything. "Do you hear that?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I strained my ears, but I didn't hear anything at first. Then it came again, a low, guttural growl, almost like the sound of a large animal, but deeper, much deeper. "Probably just a bear," I said, though I wasn't convinced myself. The sound didn't feel right. It felt too intentional, too menacing. Jason was already standing up, his hands trembling as he reached for the flashlight. "I don't think that's a bear," he muttered, his voice shaking. I stood up too, trying to laugh it off. "We've been out here a dozen times, Jays. It's probably just a wolf or something. Nothing to worry about." But even as I said it, I knew something wasn't right. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. We both turned toward the woods, our eyes scanning the dark tree line. And then, I saw it. A figure, huge, dark, and unnatural. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. The creature was standing motionless, just outside the range of the firelight, watching us. I couldn't make out the details clearly, but I could see enough to know that it was massive, at least 7 feet tall, its broad shoulders rippling with muscle. Its face was obscured in the shadows, but I could make out the glowing yellow eyes, staring back at us. Jason didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the tent, his breathing fast and frantic. "We need to go now," he hissed, pulling me away from the fire. I was frozen for a moment, still staring at the figure in the woods. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching as Jason and I scrambled to the tent. I heard the sound again, the low growl, louder this time. It was getting closer, the earth seeming to vibrate with each step. We didn't even stop to zip the tent shut properly. We just collapsed inside, grabbing the flashlight and shining it out through the thin fabric. The growling stopped for a moment, and in the eerie silence, we could hear something else. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and slow. The thing was circling our camp. We could hear the brush moving, the snap of twigs, but it wasn't just walking. It was pacing. Jason and I lay there, holding our breath, praying it wouldn't come any closer. But then, the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against the side of our tent made my blood run cold. Whatever it was right next to us now. "Don't move," Jason whispered, his voice trembling. "Don't make a sound." I could hear it breathing, deep, heavy breaths, as though it were waiting for us to make the next move. We stayed completely still, not daring to make a sound. The growling stopped for a while, but we could still hear the pacing outside, the occasional scrape of claws against the ground. It was like the thing knew we were there, knew exactly where we were hiding. Minutes felt like hours, and then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the sound of the creature faded into the distance. The pacing stopped. The growls ceased. We waited, not daring to breathe, listening for any sign that it was still nearby. When we finally felt brave enough to peek, outside, the forest was still, silent. There was no sign of the creature. It was as though it had vanished into thin air. Jason and I didn't sleep a wink that night. We stayed up, clutching the flashlight, listening for any sounds in the dark. But the rest of the night was uneventful. The creature never returned, and when the sun rose, we packed up and left, not bothering to make breakfast or say goodbye to the camp. To this day, I don't know what we saw. We never told anyone else about it. because no one would believe us. But Jason and I know the truth. And every time I go camping, even in the daytime, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, waiting, just out of sight in the trees. I never liked the idea of camping by myself, but this time, I decided to go for it. I was going to do it differently. No friends, no distractions, just me and nature. I'd been planning the trip for weeks, a solo hike around the northern forests of Wisconsin. I'd heard plenty of stories about the area, the mysterious happenings, and the occasional cryptid sighting, but I thought they were just that, stories. It was a late afternoon when I set up my tent by a quiet lake, the kind of place you see in postcards, serene, isolated, surrounded by tall pine trees. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the water, and I could hear the soft rustle of leaves as the wind picked up. I had no cell service, but I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for connection. I was looking for peace, for a break from the noise of the world. As I sat by the fire later that night, I reflected on how calm the evening had been. The air was cool, but not cold, and the fire crackled as I roasted marshmallows. I had my camera with me, taking pictures of the setting sun and the stars that began to appear overhead. The lake was like glass, perfectly still, reflecting the dimming sky. But as the night crept on, something changed. At first, it was subtle, just a strange feeling that washed over me. It wasn't something I could explain, just an unsettling sensation that I wasn't alone. I kept looking around, telling myself it was nothing, the woods playing tricks on me. I had camped plenty of times before, and I knew how easily your mind can play tricks when you're out in the wilderness, far from the safety of your usual surroundings. Then came the first sound. It was like a crack, like something large stepping on a twig, snapping it in two. I froze, the marshmallow on my stick forgotten, and stared into the darkness. My flashlight barely cut through the night, and I could feel my heart begin to race. It wasn't an animal. I knew that instinctively. No bear, no deer, no wolf made a noise like that. The sound came again, closer this time, as though something, or someone, was moving slowly toward me. I stood up, trying to remain calm, my fingers gripping the flashlight until my knuckles turned white. There was no breeze, nothing to explain the way the air had turned heavy. I told myself it was just an animal. It had to be. It had to be. But the forest was silent, except for the cracking twigs, and that's when I noticed something strange. The shadows were wrong. In the corner of my vision, just past the edge of my campfire's glow, there was a shape, a dark figure, standing perfectly still. I blinked, thinking it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but when I looked again, it was still there. It wasn't a person. It was tall, unnaturally tall. Its silhouette was too large for a human, and the way it stood, motionless, reminded me of how a predator might pause before striking. The shape didn't move for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was probably just a few minutes. And then it shifted, just a small movement, a step forward. My breath hitched, and I instinctively grabbed the knife I had on hand. I wasn't sure what I expected to do with it. A knife wasn't going to protect me from whatever this was. I shone the flashlight in the direction of the shape, and for the briefest moment, I caught a glimpse of it. The light barely touched it, but I could make out glowing eyes, yellow, unnatural, and watching me. Its body was massive, hunched like some sort of primal creature, covered in dark fur that almost blended into the night. And it wasn't just tall, it was wide, with muscular shoulders and arms that hung at an unnatural length. I dropped the flashlight, my hands trembling. The light rolled across the ground, leaving the creature in shadow once more. The air seemed to thicken around me, like the forest itself was closing in. That's when the growling began. It wasn't a growl like an animal. Not the kind of growl you hear from a dog or a bear. It was deep, guttural, like it came from the very earth beneath me. The growl vibrated in my chest, and I felt it all the way to my bones. It was a warning, a threat. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I grabbed my backpack, darting into the woods, running blindly through the trees. I could hear it behind me, the heavy, slamming footfalls growing closer, but I didn't dare look back. My mind screamed at me to keep moving, to run until my legs couldn't carry me anymore. I don't remember how far I ran, but I eventually stumbled onto a trail, one that led to a nearby cabin that I knew was sometimes used by hunters. I knocked frantically on the door, but no one answered. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I leaned against the door, waiting for the creature to catch up to me. The growling continued in the distance, but it didn't come any closer. Eventually, I passed out, leaning against the door, too exhausted to move. The next morning, I woke up alone. The growling had stopped, and the creature was gone, as if it had never been there. I stayed in that cabin for the rest of the night, too terrified to go back to my camp. The next morning, I packed up quickly and left, not looking back once. I've never gone camping alone again. And to this day, when I tell people about what happened, they laugh it off, like I'm just another one of those people with a wild story. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know that I'll never forget the shadow by the lake. It was the last summer before I left for college, and I had taken a part-time job helping my uncle on his farm in southern Illinois. Most of my days were spent fixing fences, stacking hay, and sweating under the sun. But the nights were a different world altogether. Quiet, still, almost too still. And then, one night, everything changed. I had just finished a long day's work and was relaxing on the porch with a cold soda, watching the moonlight spill across the wide fields. The corn was tall that year, almost 7 feet in places, and swayed gently in the breeze like waves on a dark sea. My uncle had already gone to bed, and I was enjoying the peace, alone with the hum of crickets. That's when I saw movement. At first, I figured it was a deer. Happens all the time out there. Animals come and go through the rows. But something about the way it moved caught my eye. It wasn't graceful like a deer. It was jerky, almost like it was trying to stay hidden, but didn't quite know how. I stood up, stepped off the porch, and squinted toward the far end of the field. The moon was bright, but not enough to see clearly. Still, I could make out a silhouette, a big one, way too big for a deer. That's when I heard the breathing, heavy, wet, close. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the field. It was behind me. I spun around, and for a moment, I thought I saw a trick of the light. But no, there it was, not 10 feet from me, standing just beyond the edge of the porch light. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, and its body was covered in dark, matted fur. Its legs were bent backward like a dog's, and its arms, yes, arms, hung long and thick at its sides. But it was the head that chilled me to my soul. It was unmistakably canine, long snout, pointed ears, but with eyes far too intelligent. And those eyes were locked on me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Every part of me screamed to run, but something deeper knew that running would only make it worse. The thing sniffed the air like it was trying to memorize my scent. Then it stepped forward, into the light. Its claws tapped against the wooden boards of the porch. It was real. It was right there. Suddenly, from inside the house, my uncle's old hound started barking like mad. The creature snarled, showing a row of jagged teeth, then turned and bolted into the cornfield with terrifying speed. Within seconds, the rows were silent again. No rustling, no footsteps. It was gone. I ran inside and locked every door and window. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I found huge prints, half canine, half human, just below the porch. The boards where it had stood were scratched deep. I never told my uncle. He wouldn't have believed me. But when I left for college, a week later, I never looked back. I've never returned to that farm. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind rustles just right, I can still hear the thing breathing, heavy, wet, and far too close. Back in 2012, I took a job as a night security guard for a mining equipment yard out in western Pennsylvania, just outside of Clarion. It wasn't a glamorous gig. Mostly it involved sitting in a beat-up trailer from dusk till dawn, watching security monitors and occasionally walking the fence perimeter with a flashlight. Boring, quiet, and perfect for someone like me who was trying to get their life back together after a messy divorce. The yard itself was massive, surrounded by chain-link fencing, topped with razor wire, old bulldozers, diggers, and equipment. Parts littered the grounds. Beyond that fence was just woods, thick, dark, and never-ending. I always thought the forest had a weight to it, like it was holding its breath. One night in mid-October, the air had just turned sharp with the bite of coming winter. Around 2 a.m., I stepped outside for a smoke break. The trailer was getting stuffy, and the hum of the monitors was giving me a headache. I walked around the back where the floodlights didn't reach and leaned against the metal siding, looking up at the stars. That's when I heard it. A crunch, like something stepping on gravel. At first I thought it was maybe a raccoon or deer. We got those a lot near the edge of the woods. I flicked on my flashlight and swept it toward the noise. Nothing. I turned the beam off and lit my cigarette again. That's when the real sound started. Closer this time. Breathing low, guttural, ragged. It wasn't like a man panting, and it wasn't like a dog either. It sounded like something trying to keep quiet, but struggling. I froze, cigarette half, raised to my mouth. Then, just beyond the faint light from the trailer window, I saw something move. It stepped forward. I could see the outline, tall, at least 7 feet. It was on 2 legs, but the shape was all wrong. The shoulders were broad, and its arms hung long, hands reaching just above the knees. Its head was wrong, like a wolf, but the way it moved, the way it watched me, it wasn't an animal. It was something else. It stopped about 30 feet from me, near the edge of the tree line. I raised the flashlight again and pointed it straight at the thing. The eyes reflected the beam, bright, pale yellow, and for a second, I saw its face clearly. A snout, long, with wet black lips pulled back over jagged teeth. Its ears were upright, twitching like a predator listening for weakness. It took a step forward, and its claws tapped the gravel. I stumbled backward, tripping over a coil of wire on the ground. My flashlight flew from my hand, and I scrambled to my feet in blind panic. I didn't look back. I ran straight into the trailer and slammed the door, locking it behind me. Through the small window, I watched. The thing didn't charge. It didn't even flinch. It just stood there, breathing like a furnace. Then it turned, walked, not ran, back into the trees. I didn't leave that trailer until sunrise. When the day crew came in, I tried to play it cool, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I asked one of the older guys if there were ever reports of strange animals around. He looked at me long and hard, then nodded once. "You ever hear of the Dogman?" he asked. I hadn't. He told me stories, local legends, things whispered by hunters and old-timers, a creature that walks like a man but hunts like a wolf. He said he saw it once when he was young, up near Cook Forest. "You see it once, you don't forget, but you're lucky," he said. "If it wants to hurt you, it doesn't stand there and stare." I quit that job a week later. Told them it was for personal reasons. Maybe it was, but every so often, when I hear something howling in the night from too far off, I remember those eyes glowing in the dark, and I remember it walked on two legs. It had been over a decade since I last visited my grandfather's cabin in northern Michigan. After he passed, the property sat untouched, quiet, slowly swallowed by the forest. Life had moved on. So had I, but when I got laid off in the city, rent became unbearable. I figured maybe a few months off the grid would give me time to reset. Just me, a backpack full of essentials. In the solitude of pine and birch. The place was exactly as I remembered. Crooked porch, chipped green paint, rusted well pump out back. Dust blanketed everything inside. Still, it had this strange comfort to it, like the woods had kept it safe, just for me. I spent my first week cleaning, chopping wood, and hiking familiar trails. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that makes you forget how loud the world really is. That changed on the 12th night. I'd just come back from a long walk around the old deer trails, scouting for mushrooms. The sun had dipped below the trees and cast the forest in burnt orange. I remember the birds going silent all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Even the wind seemed to die. I felt something watching me. That's not just a phrase people use in stories. It's real, like your skin tightens and your stomach drops. I stopped walking and turned in a slow circle. Nothing, just trees. Stillness. I hurried back to the cabin, locked the door, pulled the curtains. At around midnight, I was woken by the sound of scratching. Not inside, but along the outer walls. First one side, then another. Like claws being dragged, lightly, purposefully. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the front window. The porch was empty. Then something stepped into view. Not from the woods, from beneath the porch. It stood tall, maybe 8 feet. Muscular but wiry, covered in patchy dark fur. Its legs were bent backward, like a dog's. Its arms were long and twisted, ending in large hands tipped with claws. But it was the head that froze me. A wolf's head, but stretched too long, too thin. Its mouth hung open, revealing too many teeth, and its eyes, those damn eyes, were wrong. They weren't animal. They were aware. It tilted its head like it could see me through the curtains. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. I didn't breathe until the scratching stopped. By morning, there were claw marks gouged deep into the wood all around the cabin. I packed everything, stuffed it into my old pickup, and left without looking back. On the way into town, I stopped at a gas station. The old man behind the counter looked at the claw marks on my truck door and gave me a single nod. "You were up near Hollow Ridge, weren't you?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Damn Dogman," he muttered. "That thing's been stalking those woods longer than any of us have been alive." I asked him what it was. He just said, "It don't like being forgotten. That's why it waits for people like you, ones who come back." It was the summer after my divorce, when my sister offered me her lake house in Wisconsin for a few weeks. "Go clear your head," she said. "No neighbors for miles. Just trees, water, and peace." I needed that. I needed away from people, noise, expectations. The house sat on the edge of a wide, still lake, with a dense tree line wrapping all around it, like a dark curtain. It was beautiful, in the way loneliness sometimes is. Every morning I fished from the dock, read old paperbacks, in the sun, and grilled whatever I could catch. It was quiet, but then it started. The sounds came first. Deep growls from the tree line at night. Not coyote, not bear. Lower, meaner. I told myself it was just forest noise, amplified by my imagination and my state of mind. But something about those sounds, it felt like they were meant for me. 3 nights in, I woke to something thudding softly against the lake house walls, just once every few minutes. Subtle, measured. I walked to the front door with a flashlight, heart racing. I didn't open it, just pressed my ear against the wood. Something was breathing on the other side. Heavy, wet. It sniffed the crack beneath the door like a bloodhound. Then it dragged one claw down the frame, so slowly it made my bones ache. I stood frozen, light off, waiting for it to pass. By dawn, it was gone. I called my sister, voice shaking. She laughed nervously, told me there were legends, old ones, about some kind of wolf thing up there. Locals call it the Dogman, she said. Supposed to walk on 2 legs, big as a moose. Just stories. But the next night, I saw it. I was sitting by the back window with all the lights off. I didn't want to be seen. That's when it stepped out of the trees near the lake. Tall, broad shoulders, fur, black as oil. It walked on 2 legs with a hunch, like it had once been human, and forgot how to move like one. Its arms hung low, claws nearly scraping the ground. It walked to the dock, sniffed the air, turned slowly, and then it looked directly at me. I wasn't moving. I wasn't even breathing, but it saw me. I felt it. There was no mistaking that awareness, that intelligence. And then it grinned. The thing turned and disappeared back into the woods, quiet as fog. I packed at sunrise, left dishes in the sink, left the fish still strung on the dock, drove without stopping, until I saw cities again, until I heard sirens and traffic and people yelling on sidewalks. Weeks later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It was of the lake house, taken from the woods. Through the window, you could just barely make out me, sitting inside, staring out. I wasn't supposed to be up there alone. Company policy was clear. Never work the North Ridge without backup. But when you're 2 weeks behind on clearing old logging trails, and your supervisor's breathing down your neck, you cut corners. I took the ATV up the slope around 7 a.m., figuring I'd be back by late afternoon. The sky was overcast, thick gray clouds rolling over the treetops, like they were in a hurry. The woods were dense, deeper than I remembered. I grew up not far from these mountains and thought I knew them well. I was wrong. Everything felt off. No birds, no bugs, no wind. Just the hum of the ATV and the crunch of branches under my tires. I parked near the flagged section and started marking trees to be cut, but the silence made me pause. It was wrong. I know what a quiet forest sounds like. This wasn't it. Around noon, I heard footsteps. Not animals scurrying or a deer bounding through brush. These were slow, deliberate, heavy. I called out, thinking maybe someone had followed me up the trail. No answer. Then I smelled it. Rotten meat, wet dog, copper like blood. My stomach turned. I backed away from the flagged tree and scanned the woods. That's when I saw it. Standing about 40 feet away was something huge. I don't know how I missed it at first. It blended into the shadows, tall as a refrigerator, built like a linebacker, covered in matted, dark fur. Its legs bent the wrong way. Its hands, not paws, gripped the bark of a pine tree, claws digging into the wood. Its eyes locked onto mine, yellow, not glowing, reflecting, focused, and then it smiled. Not a snarl, a smile, like it was toying with me. I stumbled back, toward the ATV, but it moved fast, too fast for something so big. It wasn't running, it was weaving, darting from tree to tree, toying with my sightline. I fired up the engine and tore down the slope. Nearly flipped the damn thing on a root. The thing chased me for a while. I didn't see it, but I heard. It branches, snapping guttural grunts, and what sounded like panting, laughing, maybe. That was the worst part. I think it was laughing. I didn't go back for 2 days. When I finally did, with a full team and 2 rifles between us, my gear was still there. Spray paint, rope, even the snack wrappers, but there were marks on the flagged tree. Claw marks, deep, measured, and on the back of the ATV, carved into the seat leather with something unnaturally sharp, were 4 words. You shouldn't be here. I don't talk about Echo Creek. Not anymore. Not after what I saw. My name's Jake Mendez. I'm a wildlife biologist, or at least I was until the fall of 2022. When I was hired to investigate a string of livestock mutilations outside a rural town in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Locals blamed wolves, but it didn't add up. Clean incisions, no drag marks. Carcasses left in circles, untouched except for missing organs, hearts, eyes, sometimes entire jaws. Not a kill, a message. The town was called Briar Hollow, about 6 people, and maybe 200 of them willing to speak to an outsider, even fewer willing to speak honestly. Something lives out near Echo Creek, one old trapper told me. Something that don't bleed. I stayed in a cabin near the edge of the forest. Cold, silent, and too far from the main road for comfort. The first night was uneventful. Just some late-night coyote howls and wind through the bare branches. But on the second night, I found the first trail. It wasn't a game trail, too wide, and there were no animal prints. Instead, the earth was compressed in long strides. The soil pushed out on either side, like something heavy and upright had walked through it. I followed it for about half a mile, until it abruptly ended at the base of an old birch tree, where the bark had been stripped in 3 long vertical lines. Beneath it, a dead rabbit was laid out with surgical precision. Its chest was open, but nothing was left inside. I took samples, tissue, soil, even a bit of the fur, which seemed wrong somehow, too coarse, almost synthetic under the microscope. The following day, I found the deer. I wish I hadn't. It was lying in a shallow creek bed, half submerged. Its antlers gone, ripped out, not cut. Its legs had been broken and reset backward, contorted like it had been mocked after death. And on its side, carved into its skin, were symbols, not letters. Something else. They reminded me of claw marks, but too precise. Intentional. I called the DNR office. Asked if anyone else had reported this kind of thing. They told me I was the 3rd person to ask that month. The first 2 had gone off the grid. That night, something knocked on the cabin door. Not a person. Not really. It came just after 2 a.m. A slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. Then silence. I stayed frozen in my bed, shotgun across my chest. It knocked again. I wanted to look through the peephole, but my instincts screamed no. I waited until morning. When I finally opened the door, there were no prints, no damage. Just a strip of rawhide nailed to the door frame, still wet. That was the turning point. I should have left, I know that. But I'd spent months chasing animal myths, and I'd never been this close to something different, something intelligent. On the 5th day, I followed the sounds. A low groan had started outside just after sundown. Not quite human, but not animal either. A wet guttural sound, like something choking on thick mud. I crept out with my recorder and thermal camera, following it into the woods. What I found still makes my skin crawl. The trees opened into a clearing I hadn't seen on any map, and in the center of that clearing was a hole. A sinkhole maybe, 10 feet wide. but it didn't look natural. The edges were ringed with smooth, black stone, almost like something had melted the ground. The groaning came from inside it. I leaned in, just enough to glance down. Eyes, dozens of them, reflecting the moonlight, staring straight up at me. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. Then the growl came, low, possessive. It rumbled through my chest like thunder and knocked me back off my feet. I scrambled away, breathless, too terrified to even scream. As I turned to run, I saw it, not in full, just a glimpse. 7 feet tall, hunched forward, legs like a digitigrade predator, arms long enough to drag across the ground, and the face. It wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a man, it was a grotesque merger of both. Muzzle torn short, teeth long enough to show even with the mouth closed, and the eyes, those same eyes from the pit, ancient, aware. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even go back for my equipment. The next day, I tried to leave town. My truck wouldn't start. Engine flooded. I started walking toward the highway, nearly 15 miles away. A sheriff's deputy picked me up about 4 miles out. When I told him what I'd seen, he didn't laugh. Instead, he nodded. "You went to Echo Creek," he said. "You're lucky it didn't follow you back." He dropped me at the edge of town. Didn't ask for gas money. Didn't say goodbye. I caught a bus back to Chicago. Never returned. Months later, I got a package. No return address. Just a small velvet pouch with something inside. It was the recorder I'd lost in the clearing. The audio was corrupted, except for the last few seconds. A voice low, gravelly. "You looked. Now we look back." I've moved 5 times since then. Changed my name. But sometimes, when I walk past an alley or a dark patch of woods, I get that feeling again, like something is watching and waiting. I was 27 when it happened, working long-haul trucking routes through northern Oregon, the kind of job that makes you forget what day it is. Nights blurred into mornings, truck stops became home, and the road was my only constant. It was late September, and I was hauling a refrigerated load of produce down from Washington, taking Route 6 through the Coast Range. I'd driven it before, but something about that night was off. The CB was unusually silent. The moon hung low and red in the sky, and my headlights barely seemed to cut through the fog rolling down from Coldwater Ridge. Around 2:45 a.m. I saw something in the road. At first I thought it was a tree limb, maybe an animal. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield, but the shape moved, slow, hulking, like a person trying to stand, except it was no person. It rose on 2 legs, massive, at least 8 feet tall, with long arms that hung way too low. Its fur was black and matted, and in the glare of my headlights, its eyes reflected back orange. Not like an animal's shine, more like mirrors. I swerved. There was a thump. I felt it. Whatever it was, I clipped it with the front bumper. My rig fish-tailed for a second before I brought it to a stop on the gravel shoulder. Heart pounding, hands slick on the wheel. I sat there for a long moment, listening. Nothing. No animal sounds. No wind. Just silence. Like the whole forest had stopped breathing. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The road behind me was empty. No body. No blood. Just a long smear of fur caught on the metal grill, and something black splattered across the fender. Too thick to be animal blood. Too dark. I walked maybe 20 feet back, shining the light into the trees. Then I heard it heavy, breathing, raspy, wet, coming from the ditch. I backed away slowly, flashlight trembling. That's when something huge exploded out of the brush. Branches cracked, and something ran, fast and upright, back into the trees. I only saw it for a second, in the beam, but it moved like a person. No, like something pretending to be a person. Too tall, too fluid. I jumped back into the cab, locked the doors, and floored it down the ridge. I didn't stop until I hit the next truck stop. Some podunk diner off Highway 101. I parked way out back under the floodlights, shaking. My grill was bent. Fur still stuck in the front. I told myself I'd hit a bear, but that wasn't a bear. I know that now. The next day, I called my dispatcher, told them about the damage. They told me to get it looked at in Tillamook. The mechanic there was this old guy named Roy, quiet but sharp. He took one look at the front and whistled. "You hit something mean," he said, pulling out a clump of the fur with needle nose pliers. "This ain't deer. This ain't bear neither." Then he looked at me a long moment and asked, "You been up near cold water?" I nodded. He muttered something under his breath, walked away without another word. I tried to sleep in my cab that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard that raspy breathing, that cracking of wood. I left the engine running and kept the dome light on until morning. Weeks passed. I tried to put it behind me, told myself it was an injured moose, a large elk, something explainable. But then things started happening. The fur I'd saved in a bag disappeared from my tool compartment. My truck alarm would go off at night, even when I parked in busy rest stops. Once, I came out to find fresh mud handprints, huge, human, shaped, but not quite right, on the side mirror. I stopped taking night routes, requested routes south, refused anything that went through Coldwater Ridge. Didn't matter. It followed me, or maybe it marked me one night. 3 months later, I was parked in a motel lot outside Redding, California. Second floor room, window facing the woods. I was brushing my teeth when Ranger, the gas station mutt, who always hung around the motel, started barking like hell outside. I looked out. There it was, just beyond the floodlights, watching. Same height, same glowing eyes, same posture, still, deliberate. It knew me. It recognized me. I turned off the light and backed away from the window. The barking stopped. When I dared peek again, it was gone. But the next morning, I found claw marks on the hood of my truck. Deep, clean. 3 of them, same as on Coldwater Ridge. I haven't taken a long route since. Sold the rig. Got a job at a local warehouse. Sometimes, I'll still drive by the edge of the woods on my way home, and I'll catch something in the trees. Watching it doesn't need to get closer. It already made its point. I hit it, and it didn't. Forget or forgive. Whatever lives up there on that ridge, it's not just surviving. It's thinking, waiting. And I know one day it might come back to finish what started on that fog-choked road. And if it does, I hope I'm ready. After that night in Redding, I changed. I don't mean I quit trucking or became more paranoid. I mean I changed. Something inside me got knocked loose the moment I saw those glowing eyes outside my motel window. It was like that thing hadn't just followed me. It had touched something inside me. Like it left a stain on the part of the brain that handles fear. I started hearing things. No, feeling things like when I was walking through a store, and suddenly I'd feel like someone was standing too close behind me. Or I'd be home watching TV and realize the show had been muted for 20 minutes without me noticing, because I was busy listening to something distant, something breathing, watching, just on the edge of sound. I'd be driving to work, and I'd see the same damn shape in the tree line, not always in the same place, not always in clear daylight, but always watching, always familiar. At first I thought maybe I was going crazy. PTSD, maybe, lack of sleep. So I went to a doctor. She gave me pills, anti-anxiety stuff, some light sleep aids, told me to take time off and disconnect from the trauma. But this wasn't trauma. Trauma doesn't leave claw marks. Trauma doesn't track mud through your laundry room. Yeah, that happened. It was a Tuesday in late October. I'd finally nodded off on the couch sometime after 1 a.m. I couldn't sleep in the bedroom anymore, not after I woke up 3 times in one night to the closet door slightly open each time, even though I knew I'd closed it. I woke up because Ranger, the dog I'd adopted for protection, was barking again, this time more aggressively than I'd ever heard, snarling, even. I grabbed the bat I kept by the couch and flipped on the floodlights. They didn't come on. I tried the light switch. Nothing. Power was out. The barking grew more panicked. Then, dead silent. Ranger, I called out, my voice cracking. Nothing. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped toward the kitchen. That's when I saw the prints, muddy, smeared, not quite human, leading from the back door into the house. The lock was busted. The wood around it splintered from the inside. That thing had been inside. While I was asleep, I found Ranger hiding under the dining table, shaking violently. He wouldn't even look me in the eye, just laid there, tail between his legs, growling in short, panicked breaths. I should have called someone, the police, a vet, a priest, but instead, I bolted all the doors, nailed the back one shut, and sat up all night with the lights of my truck aimed at the house, shotgun on my lap, waiting. But it never came back that night. Not inside, at least. The next day, I tried to find help. I went back to Roy, the old mechanic from Tillamook. I needed answers. He was out back of his shop, working on a busted snowmobile when I found him. Soon as he saw me, his face went pale. "You still seeing it?" he asked quietly. I didn't say yes, but I didn't need to. He looked down at the mud caked on my jeans and just nodded, like he knew exactly what kind of hell I'd stepped into. "You need to talk to Garrett," he said, scrawling a number on a torn receipt. He used to be a wildlife tracker, got fired for making some claims, but he's seen what you've seen. I called that number. Garrett answered on the second ring. His voice was scratchy, like someone who smoked a pack a day and had stopped caring about lung cancer. "Years ago, you hit it, didn't you?" was the first thing he said. I didn't even ask how he knew. He agreed to meet me that evening. We sat in his trailer, surrounded by photos, maps, plaster casts of footprints that looked suspiciously like the ones I'd seen in my yard. "I call it a ridge stalker," he said, sipping from a chipped mug. "It's not the only one, but it's smart. Smarter than most. It's territorial, vengeful. You heard it. You bought its attention. And trust me, it doesn't forget." I asked if I could kill it. He laughed. "People have tried. It knows how to bleed, but it also knows how to hide." I asked him what it wanted. His face went grim. "Same thing we all do," he said. "To be seen, to be feared, to be understood. Only difference is, it ain't human. So how it gets what it wants ain't human either." I left shaken, but at least I knew I wasn't losing my mind. A few weeks went by with no sign. I started to think maybe it was done with me. Then the dream started. Always the same. I'm back on Coldwater Ridge. My truck's idling, fog rolling in. I'm out of the cab, walking toward a shape in the road. But this time, I don't stop. I walk right up to it. The creature kneels down like it's waiting for me. Then it puts a massive hand, black clawed fingers, leathery palm, on my chest, and I wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing. The scent of wet fur still clinging to my sheets. It got into my dreams, or maybe it was letting me in. I haven't slept more than 2 hours a night since, and last night I woke up to find something in the bed with me, not touching me, just laying there, cold, breathing slow. When I screamed and jumped up, there was nothing, no sound, no prints, no open windows, but the pillow next to me was damp and smelled like the road, the same road where I hid it. I don't know how this ends. Maybe it's waiting for me to go back to the ridge. Maybe it wants something else. But I've stopped pretending this is a story with a happy ending. I don't think the ridge stalker wants to kill me. I think it wants me to become like it. To live half in the woods, half in the dark. Always watching, never seen. Just waiting for someone to cross the wrong line. Just like I did. And I think the only thing standing between me and that fate is how long I can stay human. It's been 2 months since I hit that thing on Coldwater Ridge. I'd say thing because no matter how much I've tried to rationalize it, bear, man, prank, hallucination, I know, deep down in the marrow of my bones, that what I hit that night was never meant to be seen, and it knows I saw it. The changes started slow. My dog Ranger died last week. Vet said it was a stroke, but that's not the truth. He died from fear. He wouldn't go outside the last few nights, refused to eat. Just lay under the bed, whining, trembling, eyes fixed on the window, like he knew what was coming. The night he passed, I heard a sound out back, not scratching, not footsteps, breathing. Heavy, deliberate, wet breathing. I stayed inside. I didn't go to the window. I just sat there, holding Ranger in my arms, until his little body went limp. The next morning, I buried him in the front yard. There were prints, near the back door again. Fresh, bigger than before, and next to them, a single paw print, like a farewell or a warning. I called Garrett again, the former tracker. He didn't answer. I drove out to his trailer the next day. The door was open. Inside, every single photo, map, and cast was gone. The place looked ransacked, like someone, or something, wanted to erase every trace of what he knew. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Just a strip of shredded flannel on the kitchen floor, and deep claw marks gouged into the wood above the bed. Garrett was gone. That night, I started packing. I told myself I'd head south, maybe Texas, maybe sell the land, just disappear and try to live a normal life somewhere. The trees weren't watching, but as I sat on the porch smoking one last cigarette, I saw it. Not in the woods this time. It was in the yard, standing still, watching, unblinking, and it had something in its hand. A piece of my flannel jacket, the one I'd lost weeks ago in the woods behind the shed. It held it up, slowly, then dropped it to the ground like it was returning it to me, like it was saying, "You can't run from what you are now." I raised the shotgun. I aimed. I fired. It didn't flinch, not once, just stood there, the way something stands when it knows you're too late. I left that night anyway, drove straight through to Tulsa, stayed at a motel near the interstate, thought I was safe, thought maybe whatever connection we had was bound to the land. At 3:13 a.m., I woke up with my throat dry and my hands trembling. There was dirt on the carpet, leaves, and a set of claws, marks on the inside of the bathroom mirror, inside the glass. I didn't go back to sleep. I just stared into that mirror, trying to understand what it meant, trying not to see the shape that moved behind my reflection. I've seen things since then, shapes in crowds, shadows and reflections. My face looking just slightly wrong in photographs. I've started to change. My hearing is sharper. Sometimes, I hear things from miles off, an owl hooting, a car backfiring in a town I haven't been to. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the woods, with no memory of how I got there. Sometimes I smell things before they happen. Smoke, blood, fear. Once, I opened my mouth to scream, and a sound came out that wasn't human. A howl, not of pain, of recognition, like I was answering a call I hadn't realized I'd been hearing since that night on the ridge. Now, I live on the edge of nowhere again. Not by choice. I just kept drifting, further and further from the life I used to know. I can't be around people anymore. Not with how they look at me. Not with how animals act around me, cowering, whining, sometimes snarling like they see something they shouldn't. I don't sleep, I don't eat much, but I watch and wait, because I know the ridge stalker isn't done with me. It didn't come into my life to kill me, it came to change me, and it's succeeding. My hair is thicker, my eyes reflect light now, sometimes glowing faintly in the dark, and sometimes I wake up with blood on my hands. Not mine, not fresh. I don't know what I've done, but I know this. I'm not a man anymore. Not fully. I'm something else. Something that belongs to the dark and the trees and the roads. No one travels anymore, so if you're ever driving along Coldwater Ridge and you hit something you can't explain, don't stop. Don't look. And for God's sake, don't get out. Because once it sees you, once it marks you, you're already gone. I spent the next few weeks living like a fugitive from my own skin. By the time the first frost hit, I was squatting in a rotting trailer in the Ozarks. I'd ditched my truck, tossed my license into a river, and hacked off my beard with a hunting knife just so I wouldn't recognize myself in the mirror. But it didn't help. Not really, because I was still changing. The nightmares were no longer just in my sleep. I'd wake up standing barefoot in the woods, 20 miles from the last place I remembered being, sometimes with dead squirrels in my pockets. One time, with a deer's ear clenched in my hand like a trophy. I tried to shoot myself once. Honest to God, I did. Loaded the old Remington, sat in a motel tub with the barrel under my chin, and prayed for courage. The gun jammed. I heard something laugh from the shadows behind the curtain. It wasn't human, and neither was I. Not anymore. I started keeping a journal. Not because I thought someone would find it. Hell, I hope no one ever reads it. But because I needed to remember who I was before all this. To remind myself I used to be a man named Joel Carson, who paid bills and loved baseball and had a dog that curled up next to him every night. But the pages keep going missing. Whole entries, just gone. Replaced by scribbles. Drawings of trees, eyes, that grinning shape with the backward legs, and the two long arms, crouched in the dark like it's waiting for something. I'm not the one writing those, at least I hope. I'm not. Then one night, I heard the howl again. Not far off it came from, right outside the trailer. Long, low, terrifyingly beautiful. It didn't call me by name. It didn't need to. I opened the door and stepped into the cold without a coat, or shoes or gun. Just went out there barefoot in half, naked like it was the most natural thing in the world, because suddenly, it was standing at the edge of the trees, the thing I hit on Coldwater Ridge. Only now, it didn't look monstrous. It looked like me, hairier, bigger, but the same stance, same jaw, same scar on the left hand where I'd cut myself building a treehouse when I was 12. It was wearing me, and I understood. I hadn't just hit it that night. We'd merged that impact. It wasn't an accident. It was a transfer, a gift, or maybe a curse. I don't fight it anymore. There's no use now. On certain nights, I run through the woods on all fours, fast, free, hungry. I feel everything, the wind between my teeth. The hearts of squirrels pounding in trees. The taste of panic when a camper hears a branch crack behind them. I've never killed anyone, not yet, but I've come close, and I know the day is coming, because the hunger grows every time I feed, and the man in me, he's getting quieter. So if you're reading this, you need to understand something. I'm not a warning, I'm a witness. There are creatures out here, things older than memory. They don't live in cities, or woods, or even in nightmares. They live through us. All it takes is one moment, one car crash, one mistake, One decision to open your door to something you shouldn't, and you're not you anymore. You're something else. So if you ever hit something on a dark ridge road, and it gets back up and walks away, don't chase it. Don't call for help. Don't ever look it in the eyes, because it sees you. And if it wants you, you're already marked.